chew gum and talk at the same time, but it would get very annoying. Not for me, for you. All right. So this is the last one. Last lecture. I'll talk about other things at other times, but this is the end of this series. So I saved this topic for the last one because I believe it is the most important. And it is the most important one to not get wrong. Because, well, let's introduce the topic and then I'll explain why I believe that. The topic is healing others. Now that's presumptive, to say the least. Doctors heal other people. Psychologists, therapists try to heal other people. People we love heal us in ways that maybe aren't always readily apparent, but are certainly felt. And definitely felt when those people are gone. Like we can feel the good they did for us when they're not around to give that good anymore. So everything before this has been kind of a preparation for how to do this without causing harm, because that's the Hippocratic oath, right? The healer's oath, the doctor's oath. Above all else, do no harm. And well, that's a tricky thing to define because it's ambiguous. Cancer hurts and will kill you. And surgery hurts and it saved your life, maybe, if you got the right kind of cancer and a good doctor. So I don't think the Hippocratic Oath is speaking about pain as harm. And that's a very important distinction, because when it comes to our feelings, and our emotions, and our decisions, we tend to measure health by our current level of pain. And that is deceptive, nothing else. So let me introduce the topic, healing others, 2-word title. So let me do the definitions then. I'm going to start with others. That's the easy one. People who are not you. That's others. If you've been paying attention in these lectures, hopefully by now you realize that you and other people are the same thing. If other people are not the same as you, then you're not ready for this one, and that's fine. It won't. And it's not like some sort of weird rite of initiation. It's not some secret knock. It's not a handshake. It's not a password type thing. It is the thing which powers all of this does not survive anything that is not an assumption that you are the same as someone else, even if you're the one doing it to someone else who is not you. That's not said out of spite. That's not said out of pettiness. It's not said out of ego. It is trial and error and calibration, which this course takes very seriously, which is why this episode was withheld to the last. Because there are far too many assumptions that get made when this step is done first. Mainly I don't have to do the other things that have been talked about before this. So I always talk about who I'm talking to, and I always talk about who I'm not talking to, and I'll continue to do that. So if you understand everything there is to know about healing other people, and you never get it wrong or make things worse, then this chapter is useless to you. You've already got a better answer than I do. And it doesn't require all of that hard work that I'm suggesting. So leave my ideas alone and use yours. My ideas work, but only when taken as prescribed. It depends heavily on a separation of the self from bias. It relies heavily on a proper integration and understanding of the shadow, as discussed in previous chapters. It relies heavily on realizing that within everything there is a balance of masculine and feminine force. There is creation, destruction, boundary, limitation, and transcendence, etc. It relies heavily on the identification and resolution of paradox, specifically things that we think are paradoxes, because paradoxes do not exist, which means if we have found a paradox, the limitation is not the idea. The limitation is how we understand it. These ideas rely heavily on understanding where pain comes from. These ideas rely heavily on understanding where fear comes from. They rely heavily on all of the different things. And that's because this whole lecture series has been a map of humanity. From my perspective, anyways, that's why I wrote it. I didn't write this to do anything other than explain what I know. I don't care if people agree with it or not, or if they can't use it the way I can. We don't all have the same perspective, which makes it important to understand where your perspective ends and another begins, and to care very deeply when somebody sees something you don't. The test is easy. I see something. Okay, how do you see it? What do you understand? That's the right answer. You're doing it right if that's the approach. A request for more information that can be disagreed with. Here's what I think. No, you don't see that. You can't see that. That doesn't make sense. That's a rejection. Why don't I see it? What doesn't make sense? Oh, it's just wrong. I'm not going to do it. Okay, fine. That's a limitation of imagination. It's only a risk to explore an idea if you can't put it down after you've picked it up. Which, by the way, is what Buddha says about enlightenment. So you will never be harmed by an idea you don't have. That's a core idea of what hides a lot of things from us. This idea, healing others, is not compatible without understanding that virtues are things we elevate because we believe we do not have enough of them. This lecture is not compatible without understanding that things that we hate are parts of ourselves we do not understand. And that's not to say that hate is a bad decision sometimes. It is to say that if you can't explain why you're at fault, a part of you is not understood. You can't even look at it. So this whole series, if it has one thing in common, it's to describe the places people will not look. And I don't care how good of a doctor you are. Nobody does surgery with their eyes closed. To disagree is one thing. To understand is a different thing. To accept is a different thing. To be able to explain it makes it a choice. To just reject it, the choice is rejection. Very different things. Rejection is a motivation to get away from explanation is proof that you've already been there and know when that information would apply, and also to know that it may or may not apply right now. So that's kind of the preface for why this is the last lecture, is it uses everything. And that's because I didn't want to leave out the potential that we all have to be helped, regardless of what our problem is, regardless of what our situation is. We all got different tools, different perspectives, different biases, but we've got the same feelings, and that unites us. And because we have the same feelings, that means we have a language that is shared. And you'll get, the people who say, you'll never understand my pain. That's rooted in I is greater than you. That means that you don't matter while I'm in pain. It's a different way of saying that. It's more accurate and honest, if you ask me. Fair enough, that's how you act. You might as well act like you feel. It's more honest than saying you're fine and acting like you're an asshole who hurts everything. You're obviously not. So when I talk about healing, that's the other. Hey, Tony, what's up, brother?
Hey, just got out, packed up the equipment, getting in the car to get on home.
All right, I was just giving the preface, what this is not. This is why you need to watch these in order, because this one uses everything. So I was just getting to the transition for my definition. So others was the only definition you missed. Others is everyone who's not you, and the recognition that you are the same as everyone else. So that is the preface of others. If you do not see others as you, this chapter will not work, or it will have unintended results, which are probably not going to be good, because I'm only
Have you heard of
in ways to get good results. So if you get an unintended result and my intentions are only to have good results, well, there's not very many options left if you get the unintended ones.
Have you heard of the Rasta principle, I and I?
No? What is it?
Rastas use the term I and I a lot in a lot of our poetry and writings to designate that we are all the same. I and I. That's me and God, that's me and you, that's me and nature, I and I. It means that they're the same, that we're the same. I'll pull up some poetry and find it for you that I think you might like. It's some good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to, perspective is everything when it comes to speaking the same language as someone else, because everybody has a perspective, and people do not have the same perspective unless they work to make that happen, or they just happen to be born similar enough that this someone else sees the world the same way they do, or close enough that there's enough shared landmarks that you can generally feel like you're going in the same direction and looking at the same things. So that's when it happens by accident. When it happens on purpose, well, that's work. And when it happens with people who don't want it to happen, that's hard work. And if people get mad when you tried it, they're mad at themselves, and you got to try a different strategy. So anyways, that's the others definition. The healing definition. So I'm going to use a very specific definition of healing. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is what I am not talking about. I am not talking about some words and phrases that will cure your stage 4 cancer. I am not talking about an incantation or a way of feeling that will make your diabetes go away. I am not talking about a thing that will melt the pounds away, even though you decide that food is a way to fill the void in your stomach. As somehow the stomach and the soul are the same thing. They feel similar. Your liver is what feels empty. Your stomach is next to your liver. Making your stomach full presses on your liver. You are not filling that hole with food. You're suffocating the thing that makes you feel. You put enough fat around that and it'll crush it. And then you won't feel anything except hungry. So I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm not talking about growing limbs or any of that. I'm talking about a very specific kind of healing. The kind of healing that I am talking about is emotional pain, existential pain, the pain of consciousness, the pain of being alive. That is what I'm talking about. And specifically, because anyone who's listened long enough is able to hear these words, the pain that you cause yourself by being obnoxiously dumb and stubborn. The pain that you cause by rejecting things that you could explore and doing so violently. Shadow, right? That's what I'm talking about. Being trapped, being out of control. And I don't mean out of control as in causing damage. I mean, you don't have control of your thoughts. You don't have control of your state of mind. Your mood is constantly working against you. That's the healing that I'm talking about. And that takes many forms because the shame is the same. And when I is greater than you, my pain cannot be your pain, or we are the same. So that leads to a vast, but not infinite, exploration of why my pain is special. As long as you have that pain, you got something to hang on to that you know is unique. You know it's unique because you've decided it's unique. Good for you. No way to get yourself out of that box unless someone somehow comes along and says, hey, you and I are the same. Oh, no, you didn't. Because if you fix your pain and I still have mine, then something's wrong with me and we can't have that. So that's where it comes from. Pain comes from 3 places. And we covered them in a previous lecture. So here's where pain comes from. I is greater than you. You are greater than I. I is not equal to I. That is where all pain from all humans comes from. The only thing that makes it go away, I is equal to you. And you is equal to I. And both of those need to be true at the same time. That's when the polarity isn't fucked up. You can't have an equal and opposite reaction. When one thing is greater than the other, one of them is going to run out. You can't have an equal and opposite reaction with something that doesn't equal anything. And everything has an equal and opposite reaction because time links it together. And if something comes from something else, time in reverse means that something else leads to that thing. Polarity in all things, which we've covered in different lectures. So that's where it comes from. That's where pain comes from. I is greater than you. You is greater than I. I is not equal to I. If those don't make sense yet, go back, watch the lecture because it's important. It's only the source of all human pain and suffering. It's worth the 90 minutes. If it's not, then I don't know, pick something better to do. Maybe your list is better than mine. I think this is a pretty damn important one, the source of all pain and suffering that is preventable. Because then you've got your people who are so dead set on suffering that if you take away their voluntary suffering, they will immediately jump to every instance of involuntary suffering they can find. You take away the cocaine and people switch to crack. That's nihilism, by the way. You bunch of crackheads. You bunch of existential crackheads. You're so fried out on the meaninglessness of life that you forgot that you're allowed to give it meaning on purpose. And it doesn't mean anything if you do. It's stopping you. Lack of imagination. I don't know. Why people don't do things is a mystery to me. Nobody remembers people who don't do things. People who don't do things don't matter. If you don't do anything, you don't keep up with entropy. If you feel like you're staying even, you don't keep up with entropy. The goal of not doing a thing means that you will succeed until entropy makes you fail. Because not doing anything cannot build. It can only maintain. It's not enough. The universe says it's not enough. If you want a biblical example, that's tithing 10%, by the way. That's the entropy tax. Oh, we need to give 10% of our money. God's a money grubber. You fool. You foolish fool. You only think in terms of money because that's what your heart is on. I'm talking about your effort for others, your love. That is what deserves the 10% right off the top. And that keeps you even. So thinking that making the even exchange, we covered all the way back, way in one of the very early chapters, so things are coming full circle here. If you feel like everything needs to be a logical transaction, and logically you tell yourself that you don't need to do X, Y, and Z because it shouldn't be expected, then you are being illogical because you ignore that things break down when everything else remains the same. Energy needs to be put into the system to keep it alive. So breaking even, being fair, that fails over time. But it's still a popular option, so by all means, tell people how to live. I will tell people that there are a lot of different opinions on this, and there are a lot of different levels of success in the world. And some of the most miserable people seem to be very loud proponents of what everyone else needs to do so things are fair. And I see very little love coming from those people. And their lives reflect that. So if somebody has advice for you, it is fair to ask them how following their own advice has worked out for them so far. Oh, we need to do this. We need to burn this down. We need to do this. We need to make these people see. We need to make these people pay. We need to make people suffer the way we have. If only I can make people feel that way. Yeah, how's your life going? You have a stable job? People who love you? A family? Are you in trouble with the law? Are you in good standing in your community? Or do you not care about those things? Or do you only not care about the things you don't have? Of course, if you don't have them, they can't be important. And that's fine, so long as that decision doesn't extend to every other human being who wants to have the things that are important to them that aren't on your list. I is greater than you, source of all human suffering. So that's kind of the playing field that I'm talking about here. So if you've got things to say for and against this, your life is measured by your opinions. And if your life doesn't measure up, neither do your opinions. So that's the gloom and doom part of it. Let's talk about healing, okay? There's a lot of different ways to describe healing. And I told you the way, first thing you got to do is figure out what you're working with. And there's a lot of different things that come into play. But at the heart of it is the one thing about humanity that hasn't changed to this entire course, and it won't change as far as I'm concerned. I haven't seen a place where it doesn't make everything either great or awful. And that's the choice of how to use potential. All right, so the healing is potential. The pain is potential. Where it comes from is potential. Choices made about how to do what you're going to do with that information is where it all rests. So the first thing that you have to do is take ownership of that if you're going to use the words in this chapter. You don't get to hide behind anything to use this advice the way I've written it. There's other books out there that let you talk through other things, take positions that are not your own, and use those to prop up your position as though they are absolute. But that is a version of you is greater than I, attempting to fix I is greater than you. Well, that's too big of a swing. And even if you get it right, you're trading one set of problems for another. Because at the core of either of those swings is a rejection of personal agency. If the words are not enough of your own that you can't say, I believe, you've got no business giving those words to other people because you don't even believe them. Not enough to say that you do. So that's at the core of this here. If you're going to heal anybody, you need to know what that means. Physician, heal thyself. It's not a critique against healers. It's a critique against incompetent people who try to be healers. But to those who actually wish to be healers, it is an instruction that lets them do their job. It's not optional. Physician, heal thyself, because the medicine comes from you. So if you are carrying poison, you will pass it on. We've covered how that works in a million chapters. Pretty much every lecture in this series has covered one example or another of the way that we like to protect the poison inside us. It comes out. We've covered that too. The shadow does not like carrying poison. It'll find ways to bleed it out. And if you suffer because of that, it's because you're poisoned. You should be suffering if you're poisoned. You fool. Like, come on, man. What are you going to expect? If you won't let go of the poison, the things that you will not correct, that you know cause you pain and suffering. If you will not let go of I is greater than you, you will not let go of I does not equal I. If you will not let go of you is greater than I, you will suffer for it. That's not a threat. It's not even a prediction. It's just causality. It's math. It's what happens when expectation does not meet reality. You suffer. As much as we would like to believe otherwise, I is greater than I is the only goal worth having. And that is a goal that updates over time. And if I is equal to you, then when you become greater, other people become greater too. And that means you have people around you who are big enough to help you. And you are big enough to help them. Because everybody hurts in different ways. even though we use the same feelings. Like, I wasn't lying when I said we make ourselves special by the kind of pain that we decide to carry. We make it very difficult for that pain to be found without our expressed written permission. The double secret handshake, lock it behind the vault. You can't tell anybody about this. This is my greatest, deepest, darkest fear of personal failing and what have you. So many doors and locks and the rationalizations and avoidance and rejections. My personal favorite, elevation to virtue. You can't take away my pain if it's good for me. You can't take away my pain if I'm supposed to feel it. Good for you. Your most developed trait is misery. You're proud of it. What are you ashamed of if that is your measurement for pride? I don't have the answer to that. That's a good question, though. If you are proud of your capacity for misery, what causes you shame? Maybe shame doesn't apply to you. I is greater than you. I'm not talking to those people. People who have no shame or no concept of shame will reject this thoroughly. They won't get past I is greater than you. They'll say, how dare you? Problem is, I had such a shitty life that there's very few people who can come to me and say, Tom, I had it worse. I didn't get tased for being the wrong color skin, but my mom killed herself after beating me up for 15 years. I had autism and attention deficit, and I couldn't communicate with the world, and I felt isolated, and nothing made sense until I was 30. People were mean, and I felt like kicking myself in the ass every day, just grinding myself to nothing. Relationships didn't make sense. People didn't make sense. The world didn't make sense. Nobody loved me. I couldn't love myself. I didn't see a way out. And my answer is to quit it. My answer is I could choose differently. And I made it work. This lecture series is how, which is why I decided to record it. Nothing else. If I get Alzheimer's and my pain comes back, I'll know what to do. Tailor-made for me. Comprehensive enough, I think, that other people can benefit. See, I had a special variation of the I imbalance. My U was so much greater than I that I approached zero. I had no concept of self. Everything was so much greater than me that I gave myself nothing. Which means I could only learn about my own pain through the pain of other people because they were the only people I would believe. And I could tell who was being honest about it and who wasn't, because I'd had examples of both growing up. And the more I learned about how other people were going through things, the more I cared about understanding why and how and what they did, the more I could recognize those things in myself and put the pieces together and say, you know what? I'm the one who's feeding this, and here's how. We've covered that in other chapters. All of these things, they live inside my head. They're not put there by other people. I am a brain and a nervous system and some eyeballs and everything that bumps into me and vibrates, either through the visible light spectrum or the sound spectrum or whatever it is that makes us have a capacity for smell and taste. That's the only information I get. Other people don't do anything except make noise. What that noise does when it reaches me is up to me, unless I decide to be ruled by my reactions to that noise. So that is the heart of this. So this ain't your grandma's healing here. This is saying you cannot heal anyone if you feel a stab when you try to pick up their pain. You cannot heal pain you have not experienced and overcome. You can comfort it. You can validate it. You can distract from it. You can put something nice next to it, but you cannot remove it, because all of those other answers are measured in one dimension, away from. You cannot heal a thing you do not move towards. You have to be there to do something, which means you got to know what it means from the inside. And there's a couple ways you can do that. The first one is be honest with yourself about what gives you pain. That'll help you the most. You know what bothers you the most. Shadowboxing will tell you what bothers you the most. There's a lot of ways to get through that. Some of those involve the self, some of those involve other people. There's a bunch of examples. I encourage you to learn them all. The other way is to find pain you don't understand, pain you don't feel, and learn how to feel it. And remember that learning how to feel a thing temporarily does not mean you have to experience it permanently. It's the opposite. Learning how to feel a pain on purpose is the only thing that can make you not feel pain when you are not lucky enough to be absent from the things which cause it. If you do not have pain and know how to heal it in yourself, every moment that you live without it is by chance and avoidance. It's like not going out in the rain. As long as you do X, Y, and Z, you never get wet. But there are some days you can't leave the house. That's what that means. So you won't have full control over your choices if you always make the same choice regarding that type of pain. That's not a choice, it's a habit. A good way to test that is to see, could I do the opposite? Not what makes sense, not what's obvious, not what makes, what would be the only thing a sane person would do. Those are rationalizations. Maybe they're good ones. But could you do the opposite against your better judgment if you felt there was a good reason? And if your answer is no, then you have not made a choice. You are telling yourself it's okay that you have no choice. I is not equal to I. So that's a pretty tough standard there. I know this is a pretty tough course. I don't teach this shit in Harvard. Although I would like it if a couple of Harvard psychology professors would listen to this and tell me where I've gotten it right. And I would love to see how they disagree with me while arguing against many of the things that they've taught me by listening to their lectures online, which were the foundation for many of these lectures. All I did was put some extra perspective on them and combine what every one of them was talking about. All of these lectures were inspired by other people. People who saw something I couldn't. People who had this beautiful, consistent version of the world that didn't crumble, even though it was supporting all sorts of contradictory nonsense. Their view was strong enough not only to produce a successful life, where those people decided it was okay to be kind to other people, and to be honest, with themselves. These are the kind of people I listen to. Don't listen to angry people who tell me no. Fuck yourself. I'm telling you no, and I'm angry at you. And I is equal to you. You cancel out. You only get to force yourself on other people that way if I is greater than you. And you meet somebody who says you is greater than I. You two deserve each other. You could learn from each other. Role reversal. If you weren't so disgusted by each other, that could happen. The reason you're disgusted by each other is because you don't know how to do it. It's not a choice. So fix that. Then you have it. So that's a lot of preamble to get to the good stuff here. Yeah, Tom, how do you do it? Well, first of all of it is that stuff I said before. All right. You don't get to skip that. There's no back door. You can't hear the advice and then skip all the cost. If you are not self-reflective, you'll do more harm than good, and you shouldn't try. All right, so I'm assuming that I've only got responsible people who have done their homework and have learned how to take themselves out of their measurements, and have learned how to see other people's pain as their own pain, and have been brave enough to experience it viscerally. But because they're not bound by the same choices the person experiencing that pain is, they have the tools to get out of it. That's the difference when it's someone else's pain. You can experience it and use tools you have that they don't. You can fix it. You have different skills. Hopefully a lot of them. You're doing this actively. Better have a lot of skills because there's a lot of different kinds of pain. How many different kinds of doctor are there? It's no different with feelings. You get your general practitioner, sure. But you've got specialists too. So now I'm going to talk about healing specifically. So I'm removing the self. We're done talking about the self as a calibration object. Now I'm going to talk about pain in general. I've talked about where pain comes from. That's not what I'm talking about either. Pain is two things. Pain is a choice that won't change and a frequency that is harmful. It's kind of abstract to say frequency like that. So I'm going to reference an earlier lecture where I talk about your emotional wave function. That's the frequency I'm talking about. So I'm not making up a term here. I spent 90 minutes going over a concept that exists, that is used later on. So if this concept of frequency is foreign to you, you need to revisit the chapter on the emotional wave function. Turn it into math. You need 10 fingers and 10 toes to figure it out. Anyone can do it if you've been through kindergarten and you have all your fingers. If you're missing some fingers, take your shoes off. You got some spares. If you're a multiple amputee, get you an abacus. If any more things are wrong with you, then stop. Like, this isn't meant for you, then give up, turn back, I don't know, or find a way to make it work. I've offered solutions as far as I can. I've gone as far as the person who's missing their arms and legs. If you needed to go farther, find someone else. You need too much help, too much for me. Limits of imagination are hard to overcome. But healing in general. So it's a disruptive frequency caused by a choice that does not change. I'll give you some examples. Depression. Depression is a constant state of you is greater than I. That's a fucked up frequency because it doesn't match reality. Because you are equal to other people, whether you see it or not. You don't have to accept a thing for it to be true. Things don't care why you get them wrong. Things don't tell you that you have them wrong. But you tell you if you have something wrong. Your inner sense of well-being hurts. And it doesn't always hurt all the time. That's the thing. There's a few that hurt all the time. Depression is one of them. Depression's easy to point to. Anxiety is another one. Just afraid of everything. Anger, you're just mad at everything. These are frequency disorders. Like, these are perspective disorders. I is greater than you makes anger. You is greater than I makes depression. I is not equal to I produces fear. All right. There's the math. How we explain why those things don't matter is the medicine we try to give ourselves to protect the choice we make. So what do? Well, if you're trapped, there's not a lot you can do. You can try to figure it out and go to therapy, read some self-help books, listen to some lectures. On your own, you're on your own. And if I is greater than you, you're going to have a hard time because you're not going to trust anybody except you. And that only works if you're really smart. And that only works if you're really smart and you're not an asshole who's blinded by eyes greater than you. I don't care how smart you are. When you look bigger than everything else, everything's going to look too small. And the things that you need to fix you will be too small for you to hold. Other people have them. You got to get close. So how do you know what to do? Now, this is healing others. So I'm assuming that you've had all these battles, if you're still listening, or you've had enough of them that you know the battles you can fight and the ones you can't. All of it starts with shadow boxing. The shadow never lies. And I've said that phrase a bunch of times, but I've never completed it until this lecture. The shadow never lies about what hurts it. That's the full phrase. Shadow never lies about what hurts it. So if you learn the language of the shadow, that is the language of diagnosis. A doctor is a fool if they give the same medicine to every patient. Everyone's not the same. Take great care to remove our personal responsibility from our pain, which is why we take great care to make our pain different. But the shadow doesn't lie about what gives it pain. So if you learn the shadow's language, that is how you ask what is wrong. What does this person not talk about? What does this person only talk about? What does this person feel is a virtue, something they can never have? What is this person disgusted by? A thing they never do. Problem is, a lot of those things are double standards. Rules don't apply to the person giving them. It's okay for me to be racist if I think you're a racist. It's one of my favorite ones. That irony and how it's lost on the people who are trapped in that cycle. My pain is greater than your pain. And until your pain is equal to mine, I is not equal to you. That's a recipe for guaranteed racism, because it seeks to protect what it tries to destroy. Got to give it up. Can't keep your team colors and say there should be no team colors, which is a different thing of saying is, I am not equal to you unless there's more than one of me. I is less than you in that sense. You think you're better than me? No. Do you think I think you're better than me? Let's start there. What do you think? Your words. You just told me what I think. Unless you're some kind of magician, you have no authority to claim that what you think is accurate. Not more than I do, because I know what I think. I'm the one who thought it. I know every reason that thought goes all the way down. I know what I mean. I know what I'm trying to say. I know how I feel. Try telling me what you feel and why. Let's start with that. If you think I think I'm better than you, tell me why. Tell me why you feel that way right now. Can you do it without leaning on me? Can you do that with I believe statements? Or can you only do that from the perspective of I need to borrow from you to make my point because I will not stand behind it with my own words? That's a diagnostic tool. If that is true and you encounter that, you have a bigger problem than what you think is true or false at the moment. You are not seen as an equal, which makes healing impossible. So step one, for any healing to be possible without causing damage that is unintended, is to fix I is greater than you is greater than I, and I is not equal to I. You need to have the conversation / interaction / relationship with the person you care enough about to take their pain into you, to experience it from their perspective. And you need to get that shit right. And you cannot take no for an answer, which is why I went out of my way. Tony, before you got here, I said that pain and harm are not the same thing. Cancer can be painless until it kills you. Surgery will hurt and can save your life. Pain is not the same thing as harm. That's why there are two words to begin with. Pain is a potential. Harm is a potential. So when I talk about healing, you have to talk about it with its counterpart, pain. Sickness is one way of saying the opposite of healing, but that's not really true, because healing is the removal of that sort of dysfunction. It removes the cause. Which brings me to the part of the lecture that is by far the most sensitive. There's a reason this is last. This is a controversial part of healing. And anybody who believes this is not a cost is deluding themselves. So what I'm about to say is not a justification. It does not feel good. It is not a good feeling. It is not the first choice. Sometimes you need to break a bone to set it. And if you do not have the stomach to do that, and you do not have the skill to do that properly, so that you do not cause any more damage than is absolutely necessary, than to attack only what is broken and leave the rest of the strength of that person intact, because they will need it. If you hurt their virtue and strength and parts of themselves that are not causing them pain, they will not heal, and you will have failed, and they will not trust you. So when it comes to healing, you need to understand that a lot of the things that are true about a doctor are true about a healer. If you heal other people because it feels good, you are treating yourself. And it's an opiate. Because other people's pain hurts. And you're not going to help them unless you show them how to fix it. And you show them how to fix it by doing it in front of them. Which means you can't skip to the end. Because they're not at the end. You're at the end. You have to limit yourself. You have to become smaller, which is incompatible with I is greater than do, which means you cannot be a good healer if you cannot make yourself smaller. Because you are hopefully healing people who have smaller problems than you, which means they have smaller tool sets than you, which means you need to explain how they can help themselves with the tools they have to work with. And that would be a lost cause if everybody didn't have the same tool amidst all of their other tools. Everybody's got one tool that's the same as everyone else, and that's choice. So if you recognize your own choices, you can change what those choices would be if you had less things to work with. So that's step 2. Step 1 is fix the inability to connect with you as an equal. Sometimes that's easy, depending on who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with somebody who recognizes, if you're dealing with someone who says you is greater than I, it's easy. You just tell them. You order them. You order them to treat you as an equal. And they will, because they think you're better than them. You give them permission and they listen. Those are the easy people to help. They want to help. They see how they are less. They understand step 2, how to make themselves smaller. All right, they're a step ahead, but they're missing the first thing that makes it all make sense. Because I is equal to I is equal to you. So you teach them that first, and it's easy. You just tell them to do it. And maybe they fight you on it a little bit. Well, too bad, they're pushovers. Are you a healer, or are you their best friend? Is it your job to make them feel happy every moment of every day? Or is it your job to give them what they need to fix what is wrong so it doesn't bother them again? Who's the better healer? And that means if they fight you hard enough to keep themselves small, all you have to do is scare the hell out of them one time. And they will run so far from you that they will find out very quickly that they are capable of standing up to you. Because they stood up to you to run from what you were trying to tell them. So they defeat themselves while they try to prove you wrong. And that's when you mention it. Hey, you just did it. That thing you've been jumping up and down saying you can't do. There's your proof right there. Here's step 2. Now, what about the other people? What about the I is greater than you crowd? You got options. And I'll tell you both options. The best option is empathy. Tell me about why you hurt. Let me understand it. How come you don't want to talk about it? I want to talk about this thing. It's important. Do I matter in this conversation as much as you do? Are you going to treat me like you're my master when it comes to the topic of conversation? Or will we explore things I think are important too, while we explore the things you care about? That way takes patience. You love somebody enough, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're going to start to love you back, or they're going to become disgusted by a thing that can love itself. If they can't love themselves and you try to love them, that proves it's possible. They either want that or they want to be far, far away from that. So in this step of the healing process, this is where you need to recognize that you are not God. You are not the bringer of health. You are a messenger. You are a perspective. You're a potential. You may be the paper that covers that rock. You may have found the rock that is your scissors. So if somebody refuses on any level to connect with you, that is their choice. It will always be their choice. And no amount of clever words or actions is going to change what is a choice to something else. People can be tricked, they can be misled, but there is something a person can never be tricked into doing, and that is confronting a thing they are afraid to look at. People can be tricked to move away from their fear. People cannot be tricked to confronting it. It can only be shown how. So that's option 1. And notice that option 1 ends with 2 branches. The people who say, hey, you know what? All right, you're giving me the time of day. You're treating me like an equal. I better do the same. All right, that ends at the same place as yelling at the person who doesn't think they're worth anything until they believe they're. You can browbeat them into equality, but only if they think that they're not as good as they are. So both of those routes end the same way. Now, I'm going to talk about this third option because I believe strongly in no man left behind. This is the hard cases. These are the people who don't want anything to do with loving themselves or you. And this is the part of the lecture where I remind you that if you believe this is not the worst of the 3 options, you have a lust for degradation that needs to be addressed. Because if there is joy in punishment, your punishment will fail. Because punishment is not an end to itself. There should be no joy in it.
Oh, you're back now. I think it was an internet problem.
All right, you just looked like you were really deep in thought for a minute.
Yeah, it froze. I couldn't hear you for a second.
Gotcha, brother. I'm talking about the third group of people now, the people who are just actively your enemy. So, all right, so you've got a smaller group of people, right? we're talking about the people who still don't want to connect with you on a personal level like that. Well, the second to last resort is to follow the techniques of the turning enemies into friends lecture. There's 90 minutes on how to do that and what makes it go. All right, so now we have the smallest set of people that remain. The lost causes. The people who are hell-bent on their own destruction. The people who want to hurt you and everyone around them. The people who are so blinded by pain that they don't care about words anymore. And those are the people that need the wrath of God. And that's a very specific phrase. I don't mean they need your wrath. They don't need your meanness. They don't need your baggage. They don't need your pain. That is not what they need. And here's why this is the worst option for the person who heals another. You need to take their own pain. And it's not enough to understand it. You need to understand it so much better than they do. And you need to be able to force them with a view of their own monster that is so much more devilish and destructive that they ever believed capable because they couldn't look at it. And you make them look at it because you become it. So you listen to what their shadow says they are afraid of, and you become that thing. And you make it bigger and bigger and meaner. And you need to power this with ego that does not need their validation, that does not change, because this is the group of people that will kick and scream, yell, cry, scream, jump up and down. That means it's working. People do not complain when things are fine. If you bring somebody closer to their pain, they will feel it more. You need to create a moment of uncertainty. That is the goal in each of these. Choice is what changes. Certainty is incompatible with choice. If somebody is certain about a choice they are making that causes them pain, that certainty needs to be attacked to the point that it becomes a choice again. You is greater than I. You attack that certainty by telling them that they're wrong. They need the validation. They listen eventually because they're uncertain. I is greater than you. Hey, this person is not behaving like someone who is greater than me or less than me. They're behaving like my equal. Maybe they are. You create uncertainty. Fear creates uncertainty, which is why the only place it's an appropriate weapon is when someone is so afraid of their fear, they won't look at it. I know what you won't look at. You don't have a choice. What happens when you look at a thing that you don't want to look at and another thing that is exactly like that but louder and meaner? Now you have no choice but to look at it. Those conversations are very different. They're as different as the lectures in this series. Every one of these lectures has the potential to help a different person a different way. They're all presentations of things that can be missing, choices that are not understood as choices. But step one and step two is making it possible to see a choice that one does not see before. If a person's weapon is shame, find out why. Figure out how they don't think it's shameful to act this way. Confront them. Pain is not equal harm in this case. The pain is caused chronically by avoidance. Of course, there's going to be pain at confrontation. One of those two choices makes the pain end. None of it works if the healer is too weak to overcome the damage the person tries to inflict. That is because you are mapping that person's damage in real time. If you fail, you cannot help them because they are showing you their limitations in real time. There might be 100 of them. If a person is afraid that they're at fault, they will have 1,000 ways to tell you why they're not at fault. And if you are very good with the different tools in this lecture about how to get to the heart of things quickly, how to explain questions that cut through boundary, how to ask things and learn what is there by what is not said. 1,000 excuses very quickly can reduce to one problem, the source of all human suffering. I is greater than you is greater than I is not equal to I. You find that, you have the source of their pain. That's a big deal. So let's assume that of those 4 different types of presentation of pain, there's others. You can find as many different unique examples as you want. But those are catch-all generalities enough that it should be able to get you started. If you have a talent for healing, the steps after that will be easy. I don't need to instruct you on that. It's stuff that you've practiced. This is where you can use what you've learned. All right. Most of what stops healing is not proper technique. It's proper timing. It's lack of proper preparation. The healing is good. The instincts are good. Steps are wrong. Make sure that person sees you as an equal. Make sure that person understands there is a choice. Those 2 things aren't happening, your effort is wasted. So now you get to the part where, well, the person's open, all right? They believe that you're not going to tell them a lie about what you believe is true. That's the minimum. They will explore your words hypothetically and not reject them before listening to them. All of those steps are designed to reach that single goal. If that goal is not met, you used the tools improperly. And if I'm speaking from experience, you probably were too quick to anger. If I'm playing the odds, anger is the tool that's the last resort. Fear and aggression is the tool of last resort. And I say it's the last resort because that person's already doomed. You can't fuck it up any worse than they already have. You're just part of it then. So what are you going to do? You're going to be the person who was not going to waste their time on a lost cause? You're not a healer then. You're a do-gooder. Which means you only feel good when you do good. Which means you won't try to do good if you think you're not going to do it. Now, there's a difference between trying a thing and trying to do good. You can try to do good, and it means you don't do anything. or you do a different thing. But if you only like to do certain kinds of things that make you feel good, you're a self-serving healer. You'll help some people. You won't help the people who need it the most. And if your real goal as a healer is to help as many people as possible, you need to help the lost causes because they produce the most suffering. Not just for themselves, for other people. Heal the people who are easy to heal when you need help. To make a difference in the world, heal the people who hurt the most. Makes sense to help everybody. You just have to know why, what you're doing. So the person sees it as a choice now. Here is where all of the advice converges. All right, there's a reason to get it to this point. All right, the person is listening to you. They're willing to entertain your idea hypothetically. They don't reject your words before listening to it. That is the minimum. Their words or your words need to make it into their brain, unfiltered. If that happens, the rest of this is inevitable. That is when you tell them your story about pain. You tell them the story of their pain with you as the hero. And you need to be the honest hero. The hero who is in pain. You don't get to start out riding on a white horse. You're not the knight in shining armor where everything was fine. That's not what they are. You're born in the gutter, helpless, worthless. Whatever causes them pain is what you are. And if you're honest enough with yourself and you are everyone else, you will have examples of that. Because human beings and types of pain is not optional to our experience. All of us go through all the feelings you can have some way or another. So you find the one that relates. If it's a story, which means you have to find out what kind of pain they were in, which is why the shadow stuff is important. You need to listen and understand, which is the connecting part first. So I'm assuming that you picked that up to get to this point because it's very hard to do one without the other. To get a person to that state of mind when you don't understand them as a person is a very difficult thing to do. So use the information that is the product of this current condition that you've been working towards and tell a story that starts honestly. It talks about what it did that hurt you. Talk about the problems that it caused, all of the ways it fucked up your life, the ways that you hurt people, the ways you didn't treat people fairly, the ways that came around back at you, the ways it made you miserable. And then you build that fucking hopelessness because that's their hopelessness. So you need to make it believable if they're going to believe you, which means you don't hold back. You just tell it all, warts and all. I just felt destroyed as a human being and I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless. And then everything changed when, or somebody said this to me and, or all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't seeing. However you want to make that transition, tell the story of the choice that changed your life, took that pain away. And here's how you make it stick. You never mention them at all. Period. Because the shadow cannot attack what isn't pointed at it. And the shadow will make it impossible for the person who needs to hear someone else say those words in a non-threatening way, impossible to ignore, because that's how the shadow works. Which means you will have their complete undivided attention to empathize with you as a person who equals them, a choice they've never experienced from start to finish. And their consciousness will have that. And then you're done healing. Now you can do something about the pain. Up until this point, I have made no mentions of validation, no mentions of comfort, no mentions of anything that diminishes the hopelessness of what is causing them this recurring pain. That's because it's premature. People don't take medicine when they're feeling better. A lot of people die because they stop taking medicine after they start to feel better and don't finish. And it is true that if you get inside that door and you do not do a proper job, that door changes. You have to start over to try a different way. And it gets harder each time. Which means when you are there, you have to make it count, and you can't be weak and offer comfort before the choice is understood. Then you discuss the choice. Then you offer comfort for what it feels like to transition. Talk about the things that change, the things that take some getting used to, the things that will be different, how it's okay to need time. That's how you properly heal other people. That's the function of it. And I'm going to end with this, and take this for what it's worth, but I've got one life to live, and certain people, I feel like I didn't have a choice on how much I was going to love them. And I feel like I'm lucky to have people like that in my life. Like, just for whatever reason, I ain't gonna quit you. You know, I hope everybody's got at least one person like that, because it makes a difference. And my wife is a person like that. And my wife and I had a lot in common when it came to mental dysfunction. We had the same problems that we solved opposite ways. And that's, if you follow the chapter on cognitive superposition, that's explained perfectly. We both saw that we had the same issue, and another person had a life that handled it somehow in completely different ways than they could, which meant on some level, there is another choice. We didn't understand it. We didn't really go with it. But when we were together, our ability to face these situations was improved because we had two options instead of one. Now, we didn't see that at the time and fought like cats and dogs every time we thought our version of it was right or not. But it only takes one of us to get better. First, anyways, it happened to be me. I'm the pattern guy. I'm the guy who moves towards the problem. I'm the guy who, would try anything, right? It's mental. I could think any thought. If it doesn't work, I'll just try again. So I went far and wide and found all these answers and mapped them out in all of the ways that I've explained here. So I'm going to close with this. As much as a person believes you love them is how much you can heal them by force. If not a stitch more. Which means if giving love produces love in someone else, if you love hard enough, you can break through any trauma, even if the person doesn't want you to. And that type of healing hurts the most. So I can't do that for everybody. It's just, I can't. But for my wife, there were times where I was willing to have her hate me for my words, to have her hate me, because I would not accept the rationalizations. I would not accept the defense. I would not ignore the self-delusion or the blame or the avoidance or the 1,000 reasons why I was being bad and wrong by pointing at the same thing over and over again. There were times I yelled because I had to put the fear of God into a very specific point. And I can say two things that I know are true, and I'm going to end the series on this. The first thing is, because I didn't change all of the things that I said were important about doing this properly, including the proper measurements of love, the proper reading of the situation, understanding where all of these limits are, how to approach them, and how to avoid being drawn from them. I was fortunate enough that it worked. My wife is no longer on medication for depression. My wife is no longer miserable. My wife is no longer upset by criticism. My wife is no longer offended by being asked to help. My wife is no longer making snap judgments about assumptions of my character. And I can say all of those things about my wife because all of those things were true about me at the same time. And I figured out how to get out of them with her help because she loved me. And she gave me what I didn't have, which was that you was greater than I. This was my problem. That I is not equal. I had two big problems. And I only said I was greater than you when I was mad. So I didn't believe anything. I didn't trust myself. And the only time I listened was when I wanted to tell somebody no. So that was the first thing that's true. It worked. Write down how, steps. It was done over months. It's not a quick thing to unravel a lifetime of trauma. That's the first thing that's true. And the second thing that is also true is doing it hurt every time. If it didn't, then I wasn't helping anybody. So if that makes sense, you've understood this course. That's all I have to say about everything I understand about the mind, consciousness, what it means to be a human being. It helped me. I'm the only person whose life story I will experience directly. I hope it helps you, whoever you are. All right, Tony, final comments. We got.
It doesn't really feel final. It's just a placeholder until the next But no questions or comments. I'm just sifting through now to see if there's anything that I might pull up that might be appreciated. I'm sure there were points in there that I consciously rejected. Questions. Do any of them want to come back?
I'd like to think I've gotten to know you pretty well in chat and over the course of these lectures, and you're pretty honest when you see something. You know, you care. Care about other people.
Of course, lots of Pyoga this time. There was very little of the translation from emotions to emotions out of control or uncontrolled emotions. This lecture is opposed to the one two or three lectures ago. This time those emotions fit a little bit better.
Yeah, this was the one-dimensional version of those emotions is why. So other parts, like if you go back to the beginning of this series, I start with thoughts moving in one dimension. And as the series expands, I talk about two-dimensional, three-dimensional, fourth-dimensional, even fifth-dimensional concepts. And that gets more complex towards the middle. And then once we get to the chapters about intelligence and wisdom, speed and compression, that's when I start to scale them back down from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And this final chapter is how to use the one-dimensional thinking that is being in pain. Because really pain is a lack of perspective at its heart.
Yep, I follow.
Well, thanks.
It all makes sense as usual. And I'll see you in the dojo, and we still got meditation planned for Monday night at 9.
Yep, I should be able to make more of the Monday ones now. I'm going to be MIA with the weekly lectures for a bit. I've got Tom.
Oh no, we can reset times and stuff with a new group or a third person or something else in a month or so, or we no rush on that.
So when I'm back living in my house is my timeline.
Sweet. I
I've
just
got
gotta
a lot
carry
of working and furniture and a lot of late night evenings. I'll be available in the dojo for chat. I'll pop into videos, you know, that other people are having here and there. The lectures take a lot of preparation, both before and during, so that will take a backseat to the real world for a minute. I'm getting pretty ready to Christopher in the dojo. He's reached out to some artists of his, and he's gonna work on those designs I submitted so that I can get some t-shirts printed up. That's gonna be my next thing. I've got some people who can sell those. So the more people I get selling the same shirts, the easier production as a business model goes. And then from there, I'll just expand wherever it makes the most sense.
Sounds good. I will help out as I can. I'm gonna get these kids to bed, and I'll see you in the dojo. Love you, brother.
Thanks, brother. Good night.
Night.